It's working now? All right. Okay, it's 4:30. Let's get this started. Okay, is somebody else joining us? All right. Well, this is probably the first of a few of these that we might do. Today, we want to talk a little bit about the corners market and just cover some of the things that I think are important. And hopefully, if you guys have any questions, we can go into those. We won't take so long with this one, obviously because it's the first one, and hopefully it won't be as long as I'm projecting it to be. All right, so I'm just pulling up my notes here. Just give me a second. A lot of people, want to bet on the corners market, and it's not that difficult when you really look at it. Once you know what things you need to be looking for, and this is where we're going to try and cover. We're going to start obviously with what corner markets are available, and then we're also going to talk about what things to look for and just how I usually try and find corners. So right here, you probably see I have SofaScore open, and with corners, what you always want to do is look for teams similar to the concept is very similar to the way you look for goals. You look for teams that have a lot of corners and teams that concede a lot of corners. So they take a lot of corners and they concede a lot of corners. And you may be wondering, like, where are you going to find these teams? And that's why what I'm going to start with before we look at the markets is how you actually find teams that take a lot of corners and teams that concede a lot of corners. So right here you have, and obviously if you have this app on your phone, the interface might be a bit different, but I just wanted to take you through on the laptop so you guys can see. So we have here the some games that are taking place tonight. And if you can see what's on my screen, Brighton is playing tonight. And so where we start from is we come and we look at the matches. We look at match history. And match history kind of gives us, because SofaScore has this thing where it now shows you like a team, how many corners they've had in the last games and any type of team streaks that are there. Now, right away, you can probably see down here that Brighton has had less than 10.5 corners in 5 out of their last 6 games, which kind of indicates that they might be one of those teams that take a lot of corners or don't have a lot of corners. And Burnley has had less than 10.5 corners in 7 of their last 7 games, which is a record in and of itself. So what we look for using SofaScore is we try to see any time there's a team streak that has to do with corners, then we now try and dig deeper. So in this particular case, now I'm going to try and I'll take you guys through this. And like I said, because the interface is different from the way it is on your phone, you can do this on your phone at your own time. So what you'll see here is I've opened up the Tottenham game. This was the last game that Brighton played. And if I come down here to the statistics, you'll see here that a total of 9 corners. So 5 corners for Brighton and 4 corners for Tottenham, which qualifies that under 10.5 corners in the last 5 to 6 games. So this is just one game that we're looking at. And what we can do, like I said, the interface here might be a bit different. We can come here and we scroll down and we look for let's look for Brighton's other games. So Brighton also played West Brom. So now we're looking at West Brom. So what we're doing here mentally, as you're looking at what I'm doing, I'm trying to just confirm that, this team has less than 10.5 corners in a game. So that last game against Tottenham, they had 9 corners. This last game against West Brom, they had 8 corners, which again is a qualification for that under 10.5. And we'll talk about what the under 10.5 means in a bit, but I just want you to see what we're looking for. So we're looking at these teams and we're looking at teams that have a number of corners or have conceded a number of corners. And if you can see down here, West Brom also has had less than 10.5 corners in 7 of their 9 games. So there seems to kind of be like a little trend going on here in the Premier League, that there are teams that have corners, or, they take corners and they concede corners. So right here, we can see that, okay, this is, game number 2. So then that brings us now, we would come back and we would try and see, we'll come back here and we'll try and see what the upcoming game, how they've fared in the past. So we would go back here, we'll go to our matches, and we come to the head-to-head, and we just want to try and see how they have fared in their last game. So the last time Burnley and Brighton played, they were 13 corners. Okay, that's an interesting thing. And Brighton had more corners. The blue symbolizes more corners. That's the team that has had more of something. So even if you look at the total shots, that's usually how SofaScore works. It kind of highlights the team that has had more of something. So they had a total of 13 corners, 6 corners for Burnley, 7 corners for Brighton, which makes you wonder how tonight's game is going to be. So we're going to look at the game before that. And again, I'm going to come here. And like I said, just because this is on a laptop, the interface is different. But if you're on your phone, you're not going to go back and forth like this. So we're going to come down here and we'll just look at the last time they played in 2019, sorry, my bad. Okay, so they had 9 corners. So give or take, this team, there's 2 things that are happening here. And they're having under 10.5 corners in some games, and they're having over 10.5 corners, which means they are a team that have a lot of corners. And this is good for us because we're trying to find teams that have a lot of corners. And this is just using SofaScore. This is one way. So what you do with SofaScore is in your app, you want to come and look at the different leagues, and you want to try and find, so we could use the same principle and come to Southampton and see, okay, Southampton, let's come to the matches tab. And Southampton, there's a streak here against Newcastle. They have had 6 out of 10 games that have had more than 10 corners. So more than 10 corners. Now we've seen. So the Brighton game, you notice that they had a streaks of less than 10 corners. These teams have more than 10 corners. And again, if we wanted to, we could just go through and verify and see. But then this is where it gets interesting. So you notice up here, it says on the head-to-head streaks, they've had, 6 out of 8 games have had more than 10 corners. But in their most recent games, both teams have had less than 10 corners. So now, how do we qualify whether this game will have corners or not? This is where now we have to dig just a little bit deeper. And we're going to have to look at, first of all, lineups. And I know I'm kind of moving a bit quickly, but I just want to kind of give you the concept here of what things I look for when I'm looking for corners. So I've seen that there's streaks. I've seen that they're head-to-head streaks, number 1. Number 2, I've seen that there's team streaks. That means each team in their last 5 or 6 games, they've had less than 10 corners. So it's kind of contradicting itself. On the one hand, in their head-to-head games, they've had more than 10 corners. But on the other hand, in their last 6 games, they've only had less than 10 corners. So what caused them to have less corners? And this is now where you begin to look and you see, okay, Newcastle, for example, if you can look at the team here, a lot has changed about the team, especially in the attacking front over the last season. So there've been some new players that have come in and some new strategies that have come in. So now we're trying to figure out, what is it that has changed? So here I can see that the lineup is slightly different. So I'm going to go back and I'm now going to go and see in their last game, Newcastle. I want to go and see in their last game how many corners they had. So I'll come here to Newcastle. Just bear with me. So Newcastle versus Everton. So now what we're trying to see here is we're trying to see lineups. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but the midfield and attacking has slightly changed a little bit. If you notice here, slightly different players. So that means they're probably playing different. The manager is still the same, but the team has kind of changed. So that means they've evolved how they're playing. So I can't go by 6 out of 8, 6 out of 8 games where they had more than 10.5 corners. Things have changed slightly. So now I need to look at, how will this game fare? And this is where, again, I'll go back and I'll look at, Southampton's previous game, their most recent game, and, who was playing in that game, because that will give me a bit of an idea and, who will be available in this game. So Southampton played Aston Villa, which is another team that probably has a lot of corners. So I can see here that in their last game, sorry, I just can't just see. All right, so in their last game, Southampton only took 1 corner, but conceded 11, which is quite interesting, which means also Southampton has changed their playing style because if you noticed in the last head-to-head game, both teams had quite a few corners. And I'll go back here just again quickly. Like I said, just bear with me as I'm quickly going through this. So we're going back here. Just give me a second. We're going back here to the last head-to-head game that Southampton and Newcastle had. So here we are. And if you look at the corners, you will see that Southampton, am I correct? Newcastle, sorry, had 8 corners and Southampton had 5. So both teams have changed how they play now, because in their last game, the last time they played each other, Newcastle had 8 corners. And now it seems that they've changed their play style, because in the last game they played, they had less than 10 corners. So Southampton as well, in the last game they played, they only had 1 corner. So if I'm looking at this game, I can see that there's a bit of a disparity. So my thought would be that in this game, they might be less than 10 corners. This is just a little bit of a complicated way that I look at it, but this is how I like to validate corners. So now, obviously, I want to give you the more simplified version, which is way easier than this. All you have to do is just pop here to Adam Choi, adamchoi.co.uk. You can do it from your phone. So once you pop here, you just come through to where it says corners, and you just click on quick search. You can do this from your phone. And what you're going to try and do here is you're going to look for teams that have had over 9.5 corners. And if you wanted to, you could look at, leagues, and you could look at different countries if you wanted. But in this case, sorry, I'm just going to look at the average teams that have had corners. And right here, this is basic information I can give you. You can see here, Lyon has had, out of 4 of their last 4 home games, they've had over 9.5 corners, and they're playing, is this Saint Etienne? I don't know how you say that. All right. So this is a quick way that you can just do it, where you can look at corners and you can quickly just get a bit of an understanding of, teams that are playing and, how many corners they've had. And if you wanted to just go in depth, you could quickly go through the detailed. And under detailed here, this is what I like about Adam Choi. It's a free site, by the way. You don't pay anything for this site. You could come here, you can go by the country, and you could select. And 9.5 is usually safe, because a team that can have more than 9.5 corners can easily cover 8.5. And I'll explain, what the match corners are just now. So again, here, you can look at different things. So you can look at, how many corners a team takes, corner handicaps in each team corners. But what I want you guys to look at here is it gives you a little graph that kind of gives you an idea of, in their last games, Arsenal's last games, both combined home and away, 66% of their home games have had over 9.5 corners, and their away games is 50%. So they're not really a consistent team when it comes to corners, unless they're playing another team that has corners. So what you want to do here now is you want to try and pick several teams that at least have over 70% of their, games have corners. So, Crystal Palace is playing Leeds. So now I would try and verify, so I can see that Crystal Palace has had over 71% average corners. So I'm going to go and look for Leeds, and I will try and see how many corners Leeds have had on average. So I'm just looking through here. Just give me a second. Have I missed something? All right, I cannot see Leeds for the life of me. Okay. So Leeds. Where are you, Leeds? Okay. My screen is full of things, so I can't really see. Okay, there's Leeds. Okay, so Leeds also has about 71% over 9.5. So these are two teams that are playing tomorrow, which means there's a high probability based on the percentage of corners that they take, both away and home. It's about 71%, both of them. So we're looking at a possible probability that there will be corners tomorrow. So this is a game that you could pick up and you could add to a slip, and you again go through SofaScore just to verify and see that what you want to do when you're going through SofaScore is look at the three recent games each team has had, and if at least two of those games have had over 10 corners, so you count the corners each team has taken, then you realize, okay, there's been at least 10 corners or 9 corners. That's a team that has a high chance of having corners in their next game. If both teams have had corners that exceed more than 9 or 10, then there's a high chance that those teams will have corners in their next game, because teams that concede corners also, take corners. And you can see that here with Leeds. Leeds concedes corners. When they played Man City, they conceded 10 corners, but they also took 7 corners. When they played Fulham, they conceded 3 corners, but they also took 5 corners. When they played Liverpool at the beginning of the season, they conceded 9 corners. Of course, in that game, they didn't take any corners themselves. So, you can look at this and you see that, okay, this is a team that has corners. So this is how you kind of analyze in a free and easy way. Another way you can do this, I'm just going to quickly take you through this one. This one is called Daily Stat Cards. It's a paid for service, but you can sign up for a free subscription, and it will allow you to just kind of use the service for about a week. Now, what I like about this particular service, they do have an app that you can use. I'm just using the website here again just to show you guys. So what they do have here, you can go through each team and you can try and see teams that have corners and teams that don't have corners. So they have little icons here. If you can see this little icon here that says 3+ EH, these little icons symbolize. So these two teams have been in good form of had for 3 or more corners in each half of their last 10 games, which means that the Brighton game may possibly have corners. So again, you can look at the Newcastle game. It kind of just gives you context. Now, why I like to use the desktop version is that it gives you these options here where you can see their previous home corners and you can see their previous away corners. And what you can do here is that you can now kind of analyze, like, okay, this team has 8 corners in their last game, and the other game they had 7 corners, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of look at the different stats that are there, and you can also kind of look at their head-to-head, how many corners they've had. And then that kind of gives you, for me, this is a visual way of looking at these teams and finding that, these are the corners that they've had, and it kind of just gives you that idea that, they're possibly one of those teams that will have a lot of corners. All right, so I've done quite a bit of talking here, and I just want to try and, let's take a few questions before I go on and explain the different corner markets. So what we'll do here is, you can unmute and then you can just ask, and then I'll try and answer whatever questions you guys may have about corners. Any questions, guys? No questions? So I just keep going. Hi, sure, you can go ahead.
Hi, so I do have a question. Okay. And I think for me, it's which is the best option between
Yes.
overs and unders? Because sometimes you find that you're quite confident with the unders and then it's over, and the other way around. So I'm often like stuck between the two as to
Okay.
which one is the best option.
All
And
right.
yeah.
Okay. All right. That is a good question. Which is the best option? What I find with corners is usually it depends on the team. If you find a team that doesn't really take a lot of corners, unders works well for them. But in general, there's very few games where you have a situation where you go over 12 corners. If you kind of use 12 corners as your benchmark, not like the 10.5 that I use, if you use 12 corners as your benchmark, most teams about 70% of the time will have less than 12 corners. So in that regard, unders works better because I've had games where you think that this team is going to have over 8 corners, and then they take the 8th corner, and then that's it. There's no other corner after that. So I honestly, in my opinion, I think there's more money in unders than there is in overs. If it comes to corners, I would honestly recommend that everyone just go with unders. That's just my opinion. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
All right. Any other questions, guys? No questions? Okay, I'll just give you guys a minute. Let me try and open my Betway. Where is my Betway? All right. So what I just want to do here is, can I open the South African one? Okay. I seem to be, give me a sec. So I use a hack to go to South Africa and Betway, don't mind me. I only do this because I think that the South African one works way better than the Zambian one. And yeah, okay. So I'm just gonna go to the South African Betway, and I want to just walk you guys through the corners markets that are available. And then probably this is where we'll end it just for today. And if there's any questions that you guys will have, obviously if you don't ask them on this call, you can ask them in the group and I'll try and answer them. So here we are on South African Betway, and I'm looking at, okay, all right, that looked weird. All right, so I'm going to go to, because most of us use Betway, well, aside from me, most of the options that you'll find here are kind of limited, but they do give you a bit of some context to what markets are there. And I'm just going to try and walk you guys through them, and hopefully we can try and cover. All right, so here we are. Okay, so with corners markets on Betway, I'm sure if you've ever tried to find them, you just use a search bar and you type in corner. As you can see, I search for corners a lot. Excuse me. Okay, so here we are. And so what we have here, we have the overs and the unders. The question you asked about, which market is better. I think the unders is better because it gives you room. You find that, 70% of the time, even if a team is having over 9.5, even if they have a lot of corners in games, eventually they get tired of taking corners, just like the same way they get tired of scoring a lot of goals. So you want to give yourself room. And I think the under 12.5 is a very good market. So as you can see here, under 12.5 for the Brighton game is at 1.31. So the overs and unders corners, basically they work similar to the way you have your, overs and unders in goals. The only difference is on different sites, some of them start with over 8.5 and others start with over 7.5. So it just depends on what site you're using. On Betway, the lowest you can find is over 8.5. On, I think, Sporting Bet, it should be over 7.5. And I think this Melbet that I'm using, they even have, like, you can find over 5 corners, although the odds are very low. So the overs, telling me my internet connection is unstable. All right, that's weird. Are we still here? Everyone still can hear me? Are we still good? All right, sorry. Okay. So,
yes, we can.
All right. So with the overs and unders, it's basically, more than a certain number. So the 0.5 basically means that it should be more than 12 corners or more than 8 corners, less than, 12 corners, less than 8 corners. So what you find is, like I'm saying, in most cases, the best market is the, under 12.5. Although now a lot more people are leaning more towards the under 10.5 because the odds there are really good. What you find here, if you can see in the Brighton game, the odds for under 10.5 are 1.7, which is a really good odds if you look at it. If you add about 3 or 4 of those games, you're already almost at 10 odds. So looking at the unders markets, I think when you're looking at overs and unders and corners, I prefer the unders markets. That's just my own personal preference. There are people that prefer the overs, but I prefer the unders. With what they call the corner handicaps, what this is, I'm trying to find the best way to describe these corner handicaps. You're giving one team more corners than the other when the game starts, or you're giving one team less corners. So what they have to do in this case, if you look at the Brighton, it means that when Brighton starts this game, they'll start with 2 corners less than Burnley, but they have to score more corners than Burnley. So in this case, what they would have to do is they would have to have at least 3 corners more than Burnley to win. That's what the handicap market is. This is where you have, in some cases, you'll find a certain team will score more corners than the other. So a corner handicap is another way to gain value, especially when you can't really tell how many corners you'll have in a game. So like, for example, the Southampton and Newcastle game that I was showing you earlier on, where it kind of looks like there's a discrepancy. In their head-to-head games, they've had more than 10 corners, but in their most recent games, both teams are scoring, they're having less than 10.5. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there. So what you're trying to do now is, you may not know what prediction to go with. So you can go ahead and maybe look at the corner handicap and say, okay, looking at the teams and who takes more corners, I think in this case, Southampton will have less corners than Newcastle. So I'll give them a handicap of more corners so that they can maintain it. Or I'll give Newcastle less corners so that they can score more corners. I don't know if that's making sense. So the handicaps is essentially you're giving one team more corners than the other, and they have to kind of score or maintain that number up until the end. So this is an artificial number. This number has no actual bearing on the actual game. This is just your own, what we like to call an alternative corner line. So it's a different line from what's being played in the game. But this is you kind of predicting that one team will have more corners than the other. With corner range, yesterday I saw a question about this. With corner range, it's a specific number of corners. So what you're looking at is there's usually 3 bands. There's 0 to 8 corners, there's 9 to 11, and then there's 12 plus. You remember that I said you'll find that in a lot of games, 12 plus is not really a common thing. So you won't really have a lot of over 12.5 corners. But there are teams that score quite a lot of corners. So this is a market where you're trying to go with specific corners. So you're trying to predict the exact amount in a range. So the lowest range being 0 to 8 corners, that's the whole game. There'll only be the maximum of 8 corners, or there'll be a range of between 9 to 11 or 12 plus. So that is what the corner range is. And it's a good market. Obviously, you can see the odds are good, but it can hit you in the foot if, a team usually has less than 10 corners, and then, this game they have 12. So I wouldn't really recommend the market unless you're betting on a team that has a lot of corners. If that's the case, then, the corner range easily you could pick over 12 corners. If the team concedes a lot of corners and they take a lot of corners, then maybe the 12 plus would work for you. I don't think they have it here anymore. They used to have the 1x2 markets, but they seem to only have for the second half year. So the 1x2 market, it's similar to the way you predict a game, like who's going to win the game. In this case, you're just predicting who's going to have the most corners. If you're able to find it on your betting company, you can decide, which team will have more corners. And this is, when you look at the statistics, if we were to go back here quickly to Adam Choi, you can see that if you see a team that takes a lot of corners, then maybe that team would have more corners than, the team that they're playing up against. So this is where what you're trying to say is, Brighton will have more corners than Burnley in this game. And honestly, that's a free tip if you're going to play this. If you want to play corners tonight, I think Brighton will have more corners than Burnley. It's just that way somehow only has the first half option. But for the whole game, I think Brighton will have more corners. And then under the first half market, again, you do have that corner range, which is limited. You're trying to define exactly how many corners will be in the first half. And it has the 0 to 4, the 5 to 6, and the 7+. The 7+ market is great, especially when you're playing. What I'll do at the end of this, I'll give you guys my list of teams that I know take a lot of corners, and then you can just be using those as a reference. This doesn't happen in every game, but I'll send it in the group where you guys can just use it to just try and reference. So I'll give you an example. A team like Aston Villa. Aston Villa take a lot of corners. If you noticed, when I quickly went through Southampton's last game, they played Aston Villa, and Aston Villa took 11 corners. So if I was betting on an Aston Villa game, I would try and see if they're home or away. And if they're home, to me, this 7+ first half market is a good odds to go with. I know it might look like a high odd, but a team like Aston Villa, they take a lot of corners and they concede quite a few themselves. So this is the corner range in the first half is another good market that you can look at. This is for teams that usually take a lot of corners. You'll find in the first half, they usually have between more than 5 and less than 10. And it's just another market that you can look at. Obviously, the handicap market we've kind of talked about. I'm not a real fan of the first corner because I just feel like it's a tricky thing to predict. You can find the team that usually takes corners quickly concedes corners as well. So it's not really a market that I recommend, and it doesn't even have a cash out offer, so it's something I would skip. The last ones I will end with. So the first half overs and unders. The first half overs and unders, again, teams that take a lot of corners. So if you have a team like, we're going to use Aston Villa in this example, of course, Brighton is another team. Brighton take a lot of corners. Aston Villa take a lot of corners. That means that from the first half, from the first kick of the ball, their goal is either to get the ball in the net or to find a way to try and get the ball in the net. And their outlet is usually through corners. So a team like Brighton would be ideal to bet on for over 4.5 corners in the first half. And how do you predict this? If you go back to the, I'm just trying to find it here. Where am I? Okay. So if you go back here, back to the tab I showed you where we were kind of looking at the different teams and the corners. If you look at Brighton and you look at what you're going to try and do now, and this particular option will work better when you do it on your phone because it's just much better there for SofaScore. So when you come to a game, so Brighton's last game, Brighton played Tottenham. So when the game loads, what you want to try and look at, you're looking at the statistics here. Click on what says the first. This is the first half. So you see that in Brighton's last game against Tottenham, they took 4 corners and Tottenham took 2. That's over 4.5 corners. That's 6 corners. So look at that market and look at that odds. That's the power. This is, I don't really want to call it the power, but this is the possibilities that you have with corners versus with goals. A team that takes a lot of corners, like I said, will obviously concede quite a few. It's just generally how it works. So the odds for them to have, over 4.5 corners in the first half may look high, but a team that generally takes a lot of corners will, they will be able to cover that odd. And, there's over 5.5, and then there's the 6.5 market, which for teams that don't take a lot of corners, the under 6.5 market for the first half is a good market to look at. And it'll save you guys a lot of stress because you don't have to wait for the whole game. And then corner range for each team just basically covers, which team will have more corners. As you know, Brighton, like I've mentioned, Brighton is one of the teams that takes a lot of corners. 7+ in the whole game, very possible. So 7+ means that it must be 7 or more corners in the game. So you could play that option, or if you feel that, this team may only have a specific number, you could go 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. this is all going to be dependent on your research. So those are the corner markets. I feel like I have breezed through this simply because there's a time limit here, but let's try again. Anyone have questions before we kind of wrap this up, or I just kind of show you one last little gem that I use for corners? Any questions? We're all clear? All right, so one last tool. This is a free tool. It's called BetLamp. I'll also send the link for this in the group. What this site does, and what I like about it, is that it can send you email notifications when a team has, a certain number of corners every game. That way you can kind of know which teams to look for if you're trying to build a list over the time. So what happens here is, this you can only access on a laptop or a tablet. So you sign up, it's a free service. Like I said, I'll send you guys a link. And then you come here and you select the options that you want. So we're looking at team corners here, but if we were to go to the game corners, what we could do here, and this is what I like about it, is you can select, whether you want over 9.5, 12.5. So the 12.5 market. So I'll look at the time frame, the last 8 games that home team has played, and we'll look at played at home. So at least 2 games that they've played. So what we'd look at is under the percentage, under 12.5, at least 60% of the time, 60% being the highest probability that you can get. So as you can see here, it kind of gives you a list of teams that are that have a high probability of under 12.5. And if you have these teams on your betting site, you can actually bet on them. So you can see here that, for example, in Colombia, there's a lot of teams that kind of have an under 12.5. Now, what I like about BetLamp is that you can sign up for email notifications. So you can give it a name. So as you can see, I've had a few that I've signed up for. So I could say under 12.5 Major League. So when I save it, what will happen, and I guess I do have that one already. So I guess that'll be, okay, I'll say this one is under 12 corners. So what happens is I'm going to get an email alert every time there is the games that fit my criteria. So you see my little filters here. The home team, last 8 games that they've played at home. How many under 12.5 have they had? I could also do the same for the away team if I really wanted to kind of narrow it down. The away team, how many games they've played, 8. And then, how many games they've played overall. And then here I could also do the under 60%. So that way what I'll get is both sides, both away and home, teams that have had over 60% of their games have had under 12.5. And then, on my betting site, I could try and find these games, or I could do some further research. So this is just one last gem. Like I said, I'll send this one through. So yeah, that's a little bit of a wrap. Obviously, the first call and a little bit of jingles here and there. I'm not sure if I've covered enough. If you guys have any questions, I think we have a few more minutes before Zoom will kick us all out. So hit up. Let's ask if you have any, or we'll just end this call. Any questions?
Hi, sorry. I wanted to find out because this group is basically like about teaching, like the basics of betting. Is there any predictions group though?
I don't have any predictions. I find that the best way is to kind of teach. What I can do is, if you guys, you want us to kind of, maybe let's walk through this over the weekend and try and, predict corners just so that we can get a better understanding. I can do that. But generally what I'm trying to do is just, help everyone, be able to bet on their own and be able to make their own predictions.
Of course. Okay. No, I understand. Thank you so much.
All right. No problem. Any other questions? No questions? All right. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. Like I said, you may not have questions now. Obviously, you might need to digest this. I will try and get a copy of this video, either upload it to YouTube and then share the link in the group. I need to just send you guys a list of the teams that I know usually have over 8.5 corners. And then if you guys have any more questions, we can obviously take it up in the group. You can ask. Whenever I have time, I will try and answer. Anybody else who understands corners or bets on corners can also give their input. All right, everyone. Thanks for your time, and we shall talk on Telegram. All right. Where do I haven't used it's first week using Zoom, so I'm trying to figure out where everything goes. All right. I think that's where.